Welcome back to Inside Ambition, a casual news show where we talk about all things Drexel and about some other things happening in the Philadelphia area. I'm your host, Alexander George. Quarantine has taught me a lot about what I should have never taken for granted, like 24-hour Wawa, GoPuff, and Ed's Boom Boom Pizza. I guess it's no secret how I spent most of my Friday nights. One thing that disrupted a lot of us when COVID-19 first hit was access to housing. In mid-March, Drexel announced that it was shutting down all residence halls, and residents had less than a week to move their stuff out. According to Drexel Now, 65 residents, mostly freshman international students, opted in to Drexel housing for the spring term. They are now living in Canaris and Stiles Hall. Yeah, Stiles actually exists. I'm sure you can find it in between the yellow brick road and the wardrobe that leads to Narnia. And luckily, sophomores in ACC housing were granted lease forgiveness, and they are no longer required to stay in Drexel housing, as they did not really have any other options. Many sophomores chose to move back home and left their belongings behind, so U-Cross is now basically a glorified U-Haul. With the fact that so many of us faced issues with housing earlier this term, I wanted to take a look at one of Philadelphia's most vulnerable populations, the homeless, and how they are handling the coronavirus. Now, let's take an inside look. Regardless of your housing situation, at the start of winter term, a lot of us were shuffled around, across the city, across the nation, and across the globe. Some students still haven't been able to make it home, considering the travel bans around the world, and others still have valuables left behind in Drexel housing. Thank God I brought my goldfish Phil, that's Phil with an X instead of a P, home with me for spring break. Otherwise, he'd be swimming with the fishes. Well, not swimming because he'd be dead, but you get it. Even though this was the first time many of us may have experienced the loss of housing, 14% of four-year college students are homeless, and another 60% are housing insecure. I gotta say, overall, I'd say that Drexel handled this situation pretty well. They were able to refund students for spring term housing who decided to return home, and they also offered an appeals process for students who needed to stay on campus. And other students who lost housing were able to quickly and conveniently find sublets, as many off-campus students decided to move home as well, and these sublets were offered in a student support Facebook group. It's not too often we see people who are homeless at Drexel, but if you take a step in pretty much any direction off campus, you are sure to meet several. I quite like running into the regulars who work the Market Frankfurt line. My personal favorite is the gentleman that carries a sign that reads, "I'm homeless. Please buy these homemade cookies to support me." Does he realize the irony in that? I wonder. Believe it or not, Philadelphia has the lowest number of street homelessness per capita of any of the largest cities in the United States. For any of you that grew up in the suburbs, this might come as a shock, but it's true. But still, Philadelphia's homeless population is just under 6,000 people, 1,000 of which are unsheltered. Many homeless residents stay in encampments. These encampments are usually close to a source of shelter, like a bridge. Early on in the pandemic, the CDC recommended that government officials not clear encampments, that is, unless they were able to guarantee housing for the homeless staying there. Clearing encampments causes residents to disperse further throughout the community, and they lose connection to their resources. These factors increase the spread of infectious diseases like, well, COVID-19. Not to mention, if the homeless are scattered throughout the city, it is harder for outreach workers to reach them. But just a day after the CDC issued these regulations, Philadelphia officials cleared an encampment near the convention center. I know that most people try to avoid their neighbors at all costs. I shouldn't be one to talk. I have a personal vendetta against the family that lives across the street because they like to scare me with their over-the-top Halloween decorations every year. One year, they had Freddy Krueger lined up outside of my bedroom window. Yeah, sure, he was made of plastic, but those hands looked real. As much as I might hate to say it, it's times like these when we need to be looking out for our neighbors as best we can. And Philadelphia's homeless population is no exception. But the reality of the fact is that there are many people who are homeless who are not looking for any assistance or service. So the best way to protect those folks is to let them continue to stay in the encampments they are residing in. They have built their own support groups, and it's critical that they remain where they are. People who are homeless and have tested positive for the coronavirus while staying in shelters have been transported to a quarantine site. 13 floors of the Holiday Inn Express in Center City were rented out for this specific purpose, and also to house medical professionals who cannot go home to their families during the pandemic. Under normal circumstances, homeless shelters are extremely cramped to maximize capacity. Beds can be as close as 18 inches apart. That hardly qualifies as social distancing. Therefore, these are very vulnerable spaces for the disease to spread. Some shelters are capping their spaces at 20 residents when they would usually house 100 plus. This has forced some homeless to find their way to the Philadelphia International Airport. Homeless shelters at this point are not only desperate for more beds, but also more spaces to house people. The number of homeless in Philadelphia is only expected to rise after the financial devastation the city is facing due to COVID-19. We can all recognize right now that the future is bleak. Rather than wasting time and energy on evictions at these homeless encampments, the city should be working towards a more permanent solution. If you are a student that is currently struggling with housing, check out the Mutual Aid for Drexel Students Facebook group we've linked below. To stay up to date with the situation regarding the homeless in Philadelphia, or to learn more about how you can help, check out Project Home and the Philly social justice newspaper, One Step Away. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe and follow our Instagram at inside_ambition to stay up to date with all of our content. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.